In today's video, you're going to use radial balance to create a design. You could research radial designs and mandalas for inspiration. Enjoy the video. Today we're going to focus on the design concept of radial balance. So radial balance is a circular type of balance. Now in this case, this design is both radial, circular, and symmetrical, where it's the mirror image on either side. One of the things that you do when you work with balance is you want to have kind of equal amounts of your elements. So in this case, I tried to make equal amounts of shapes and equal amounts of black versus white. In this particular case, I tried to use equal amounts of white, black, orange, and green throughout, or a turquoise. I'm going to show you how to create a radial design. So what you're going to do is you're going to grab a piece of paper. It's very important. I kind of gave some marks on here. When you look at your ruler, you need to figure out where the zero is. So sometimes the zero is at the end, sometimes it's in the ruler a little bit. So what I'm going to do in this case, I'm going to measure 8 inches, put a dot, 8 inches, put a dot, draw a line, come the other way, other direction, figure out where the zero, put 8 inches, put a dot, 8 inches, put a dot. Let me give you some advice. Once you have 2 dots on either side, then you could very easily put your pencil down, rotate your ruler, all right, and then use your scissors to cut this out. I'll give you a little pointer when it comes to scissors. When you use scissors, don't come down all the way. So you'll get a nice, neat cut if you do this. So if you go down all the way to the tip, then it gets, kind of jaggedy. So when you're working with your design, you have that to work with. Whoops. All right, so you cut yourself an 8 by 8 inch square. Remember, make 2 dots to go from there. So if you draw 2 dots, then everything is going to be nice and even for you. All right, this step, you put your pencil down in the corner, hold your pencil back, draw your X. I made a little diagram here. So from each side, you're just going to rotate your paper and measure in 4 inches, because we're dealing with an 8 by 8 inch square. So what you're going to do is you're going to find 0 and measure and rotate, measure and rotate, measure and rotate, measure and rotate. Now if you did the measurements right, it's also going to cut right through the middle, so watch that little trick. Alright, so there we go. Now the next step that we want to do is this. So you could either use a compass and draw circles around, but if you don't have a compass, I'm going to go through this step for you. What you're going to do is you're going to put your, always in the center, you're just going to put your ruler at 0. You're going to go down the line and put a dot at every inch in this particular case. Okay, I'll do a couple of those and then I'll just move on to the next piece of paper. So put your ruler at 0 in the center and then go ahead and rotate your ruler to the next line. All right, until you have this. So once you have this, and you can keep all your pencil lines really light. Okay, so once you have this, we're setting up some guidelines for our radial design. Then you could just go in between and put your pencil down on one dot, draw to the next closest dot. And this is a good way to work with dividing up your space, so that way we can use measuring to make our circular design. Okay, So fast forward, I have measured an inch away from the center out. I connected all those lines. All right. So in this particular case, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and talk about how to work with a radial design. So what you could do is you could repeat a shape 8 times for playing with intersection points, and it will definitely work. Now, this is going to be a how-to video, so my drawing's not going to be perfect. I also recommend making a few templates and practicing on one and then exploring color and all that sort of stuff. So that's one thing that you could do. You could repeat the exact same thing 8 times. You could even play around with intersection points. So I'm going to do another 8 pattern. So I'm going to just estimate where the center is there. Okay. So this is one option. Another option for you. Again, play around with those intersection points. That will definitely help you create a nice, even, balanced design. So when we're dealing with balance, we're dealing with visual weight. Okay. And symmetry and radial designs are great approaches to learn the concept of balance. All right, so something else that you could even do, you can skip a few of these lines. So I could play around with these intersection points here. Okay, so if I really wanted to, whoops, I could play around with these intersection points, the new intersection points, and I could even skip to a further intersection point. So I'll just do a few of those. Now, other things that you could do. So once I'll just go ahead and finish that. So you could use organic shapes, geometric shapes. You could be inventive with your shapes. You could use a ruler. I think the more that you play around with these intersection points, the more unique or the better balanced your design will be. Okay, you could keep the guidelines or get rid of the guidelines. All right. So another general thing to think about is anything on the T. Let's say I'm going to do an alternating pattern. So if I wanted to put a little arch on the T versus the X, that would be acceptable because look at that. That's going to be nice and even. Now inside the X, I'm going to put a different shape inside the X, or using the X as a guideline. Now, to get more sophisticated with your design, we could start doing like different shape inside a different shape. We could get really intricate with our design, okay? And we get really unique. One of the things that I recommend is using similar shapes throughout to create unity to your design. So let's say if I'm going to incorporate a circle, I want to at least incorporate circles throughout or other types of similar shapes so I could create some unification. So I kind of experimented and played around and worked with shape inside a shape, playing around with some intersection points, and explored some different possibilities. And later on, as I improved my skills, you can see that these are a lot more sophisticated. They're a little bit bigger, which is fine, but I recommend working with a 8x8 to begin with because most rulers are 12 inches. And so to create that sensation of balance and unity is when you pick, if you pick 2 colors, for example, like black and white, try to have equal amounts of black and white throughout. In this particular case, I worked with 2 neutrals, which would be black and white, and then I chose a warm and cool color, so we create some contrast. So good design you know, if you're using the elements or the principle of contrast, not the element, you're using elements of line, shape, color. You could use textures, all sorts of different things. And when you're working with a radial design, you're working with the visual organization of that. So as you get more sophisticated with your radial design and more intricate, you know, things to consider. To see the shapes, you could use black versus white throughout, and that's going to create high contrast. So it's really going to pop out, and you're going to be able to see things really well. Again, if you want to incorporate color for contrast, you could use warm versus cool, or you could even use like a dark color versus a light color. So use repetition. In this particular design, there's little circles, there's similar shapes throughout it. You could use mirrored shapes, shapes within side of shapes, so you create that sense of movement. So everything's going to move in and everything's going to move around, okay? So the radial design is going to definitely move everything in. It's going to incorporate that sensation of movement throughout. So, you know, you're going to be, you know, using that balance strategy of the radial, which is also going to be radial symmetry. You're going to use a lot of repetition, so it's going to be very pattern oriented. So it's going to be very consistent versus rhythm. Rhythm's going to be more loose, okay? And then use that idea of contrast in your design. Something unique is going to happen. So with your radial design, your eyes are going to constantly move in, and you're going to that centerpiece is going to be that focal point. It's going to be that area that stands out. So in this particular case, your eyes move in, and this kind of center design is where you always focus on. All right. So the nice thing about working with the radial design is when you study all the principles of design, everything's in there. Everything's in there except for rhythm. There's two different ways for using the idea of repetition. It's going to be a little bit more pattern oriented. Obviously this is an asymmetrical balance just because there's subcategories as well. So hopefully this is helpful for you. And let's see what you guys could come up with. You know, start off with an 8x8 square and create something really unique. And yeah, follow these steps. You guys are going to do something amazing. All right, have a great day. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you are inspired to make something unique, something creative. As always, be a good person, do good things. Thanks again for watching my video.